Well, good morning. I appreciate you guys coming to get an update. Just to give you a little background, uh, last week while I was in China, I had my team have the opportunity to sit down with both road builders and the union people, the operating engineers, to talk about this situation. Uh, they talked about various items, didn't get to a resolution. So today we had another meeting, um, and the discussion idea is basically we're not taking sides, we're not getting in the middle of a labor dispute, but we have an interest for our citizens because obviously our roads are critically important. And we have a lot of road projects that are currently under construction that are not making progress. And we have the winter coming. So we have a real concern about the safety of our citizens and their quality of life in terms of having these roads be available in some fashion. So we sat down with both parties. I'm not going to go give you any back and forth between the parties. The goal was to say, could we get a short and long-term solution? And if we couldn't get both, could we get a short-term solution? To essentially say, could we get through the construction season and then have discussions going on and see if there's a long-term solution that we could help facilitate or they could work out between themselves. To give you the quick bottom line, we weren't able to get either a short or long-term solution. It was clear the parties were not in agreement, that there is no activity that's going to immediately take place to get the road work going again. The couple things I would share with you is we did talk about staying in touch, about following up later in this week in an ongoing basis. I asked people to think about their positions, to go reflect on them, to see what we might be able to do if we couldn't do something today. I also made it clear that as governor of the state, I have an interest to make sure our citizens are being protected in some fashion, and that I would look at what other options that might be merited to address this situation in some fashion. If they couldn't agree, are there other things we could do to ensure greater safety and concern for our citizens in the interim, at least through the beginning of winter when construction would have to stop? That's basically a summary of the situation. You may get comments from either party. I actually asked them not to get involved in the context of what we were talking about in the meeting. I hope you respect that. I know part of your job is to ask questions, but I hope they respect that. So with that, I'll be opening up for a few questions, not a lot of questions, because to be blunt, there's not much to say, as I would like to say. Yeah, we're still looking at all the legal options. It's not as simple as simply declaring a state of emergency and having them go back to work. Again, much of this is under federal labor law. And again, there are the old cases you can probably recall from your history books where the president could call people back to work in those situations. I don't believe that's the same situation we have as the state. We're still looking at all our options. And again, I am looking at all options. Everything, as we mentioned, the thing to say how we could potentially use the National Guard on some critical projects. It wouldn't be the same as typical construction, but could they help button up or get some in a better spot than they are today, to looking at legal options? Those are still all on the table that we're looking at to see what's available. Yeah, I wouldn't say we set specific dates, Tim. What I would say is we understand the winter's coming, so there's a fairly limited amount of time. I wanted to leave the door open to continue some dialogue because this is the first one I was personally in. And again, in a situation like this, they can be fluid, as hopefully either the contractors themselves hear feedback or the union members hear feedback, because our public is not going to be happy about this. I'm not happy. This is not a good situation. So what I would say is I'll be looking at continuing action as we review options, and to be open, I'm most likely to go to them to let them know here's the consequences of a failure to make progress. Yeah. I think there are specific cases we're looking at. It's not as simple as just that, Rick, because there's legal issues about where this stands in the status. Part of the issue we have is this hasn't really happened before, is my understanding, in terms of saying, do we have a track record of knowing how the state can intervene when there's a labor dispute involving parties that we're not a contract to, involving roads? There isn't really a track record, so we're blazing new ground here. So that's where I don't want to overstate things until we're very solid on what legal grounds and what options we have. We're not at a point for me to go through that, and I would do that in terms of our choices once we have that status. No, I don't believe we've gotten a response from them yet. I actually have to look at Travis. Yeah, we're still in dialogue with them, but we don't have a conclusion yet. Oh, let me get. Well, again, that's the balancing act we're looking at. And again, we do have engineering units within our National Guard that are heavy equipment operators. They do this on a regular basis. They've been deployed in multiple places around the world doing road work. They've actually helped. They were doing work on the UP flooding situation, the last 2 floods up there. So that we do have experienced people that can do that. What I would say is, I wouldn't view that as simply saying their role is not to come in and become the operating engineers union and take over road projects and do traditional projects. Their role would be to come in, if we deployed them, to look at saying, how do we have critical projects that in particular have higher safety risk or higher commuter challenges to them that would be good, that we could make some progress before winter happens to help ensure the safety. And I think if you put it in that characterization, I think I clearly have the authority to do that. It wouldn't, I view it, we're still in dialogue. We're going to follow up with folks. I don't want to get into having people perceive what tools I'm using, because I don't want one side or the other to say, well, you're looking out more for one side or the other. My goal is not to take sides. My goal is to get the road work going again. I take steps, and I follow through on what I say I'm going to do. I don't know if I'd use that word, Tim. I have my own style. I'm a relentless positive action guy, but I believe in taking action. I'll let you decide how you want to describe it. I'm not going to use that terminology. It's difficult. I mean, that's something that we had a meeting that I thought our team thought had some progressive elements to it that didn't come together as well. What I would say today is the situation is challenging and very challenging. And so that's where I really ask people to say, I didn't see the point of continuing the dialogue at this point. I thought it best that people sort of have an opportunity to go back, think about it, talk to their constituencies, and see what other actions might be relevant. So, and I appreciate it. Again, I'd come back to the point of this is between, 2 parties to a labor dispute, but at the same time, it involves our roads. Our citizens drive on these roads. These are roads that we pay for. So we do have an interest in terms of protecting our citizens to work hard, particularly as we come to the wintertime here when that work could stop. So I just want to make it clear that we're being proactive about addressing those kind of questions to say, one, can we help support these 2 parties in solving their problem, either short or long term? And then secondly, in lieu of that, what actions we can take to represent our citizens best in terms of having the best safety or convenience or quality of life possible given a difficult situation. So we'll keep you up to date as we go through this. Again, I'm not going to jump into that because you're making your characterizations. I can tell you those parties might characterize those things differently.
Am I wrong on the facts that the contract expired June?
I think I'm not sure you're correct on the facts. In terms of how, well, there are different portrayals of these. So I'd be very careful on how I would characterize things. And I'm not going to get into that because, again, I don't think there's even an agreement on characterization, potentially. So as a practical matter, the issue is we have an issue in front of us that really started accelerating when the lockout happened, when the work stopped, and so we've been proactive in terms of addressing that. So with that, I think that was the last comment. Thank you. Thanks.